welcome to you all. This is the third of 5 Creative Economy seminars in the series that's being sponsored by the Prince Edward Lennox and Addington, CFDC, and the Ontario East Economic Development Commission. We're delighted that you can be present. You may not know this, but also present are several individuals joining us by video conference. We have sites in, as you can see briefly, Guelph, Ottawa, Toronto, Timmins, Dryden, and elsewhere. I believe our representatives come from the Martin Prosperity Institute, OMAFRA, University of Guelph, Rural Secretariat, Patricia CFDC, and others. Thank you so much for joining us. We're delighted that you have taken the time to be present. We want to thank our video conferencing team. They relentlessly and faithfully provide the very best of services, and we are so grateful. For those of you who've been arriving late, there are hard copy slides available of both sets of presentations, and we encourage you to get them now or at the end of the session. Those of you who are remote, please know that they will be posted on the Mollison Centre's website. The session is being video conferenced. The entire session will be available on the website also. That is http://business.queensview.ca/knowledge. I'd like to start by introducing our speakers. We are absolutely thrilled to have with us today both Dr. Greg Spencer of the Monk Centre and also Dan Taylor of Prince Edward County Economic Development. They will be co-hosting this session, co-presenting, and I'll take the opportunity to present both now. Greg Spencer is a postdoctoral research fellow with the Program on Globalization and Regional Innovation Studies at the Monk Centre for International Studies of the University of Toronto. Dr. Spencer's research broadly deals with the economies of cities in a global context. His University of Toronto dissertation, entitled The Creative Advantage of Diverse City Regions, Local Context and Social Networks, examined how the creative process is influenced by differences in local context and social networks. He has looked at how this impacts the economic geography of Canada. Greg has taught courses in social research methods, in regional dynamics, in statistics, and so on, in multiple departments at the University of Toronto. Before obtaining his doctorate, he worked for many years at the Local Futures Group, an economic development consultancy based in London, England. Greg holds a master's in planning from the University of Toronto and a BA in geography from Bishop's University. With us also is Dan Taylor. Dan is passionate about the rural creative economy. After becoming the Economic Development Officer for Prince Edward County in 2001, he realized that he was working in a creative rural economy, even though he wasn't at the time aware of what that concept really meant. Since learning about the language, tools, and theory, Dan has become a champion of the practice of creative economic development. As a result of this focus, Prince Edward County's economy has grown at a rate greater than that of other regions in Ontario and Canada. We have much to learn today. Prince Edward County, also represented, of course, by our sponsor, Craig Desjardins of the Pella CFDC, is an innovator in rural economic development. Dan's passion on the creative rural economy has driven him to collaborate with and lead a creative economy action plan for Eastern Ontario, Durham region, and Southwestern Ontario. As a result of this collaboration, he is chairing a new Ontario-based Creative Economy Alliance. His goal is to engage the province of Ontario to develop policy tools and financial packages to stimulate and grow the creative rural economy. Please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Okay, thank you very much for that very nice introduction. I'm very pleased to be here today. Dan and I are going to do basically 2 separate presentations that hopefully will meld together quite well. I'm going to start off with sort of slightly more academic, big picture data sort of picture before handing it over to Dan, who's going to talk about how this is happening sort of on the ground, actual case studies and things from Prince Edward County. So as you heard from my introduction, you probably heard a lot of urban, and obviously we're talking more about rural today. So I'm going to start off by saying just about how I've moved a little bit of my work from that urban context to the rural context in terms of the creative economy. First of all, I'm at the Munk Center, part of something called the Innovation Systems Research Network. We have had two 5-year studies funded by SSHRC. We're actually in the last year of the second project, so this is research that's been going on for 10 years now. The first project was looking at industrial clusters across the country. We had 27 case studies of various clustering activity, trying to understand local economic development from that sort of industrial point of view. The second project that we're working on now, and we're just about to conclude, is more of an urban local economy project, looking at the social dynamics of creativity and innovation. Looking at various themes around specialization versus diversity, the role of talent attraction, retention, local governance issues as well. And doing case studies across 15 cities across the country, and trying to find common themes, but also understanding that economies work differently in different contexts and trying to understand how that differentiation plays a role in local economic development. These are just simply the 15 case studies that we're looking at, Kingston being one of them. I saw that Betsy Donald was a previous presenter at one of these seminars. She's one of our research partners here at Queen's. So this work is really about a lot about social relationships. The idea that learning is a social process, so creativity, the creative process itself, has a lot to do with interaction and who you're interacting with. If we think about this in geography terms, obviously if your actual interaction has a lot to do with what you know, then who you're around has a lot to do with what you know. So trying to unpack this sort of connections between where we are, who we know, and what we know is a lot to do with sort of understanding the creative process from a geographical point of view. Understanding there are different social contexts, different local contexts, with people with different knowledge bases in those contexts, interacting with one another, the idea that when people come together, know different things, perhaps you learn from each other, and new ideas come about as a result of that interaction. So we're looking at things around the importance of face-to-face interaction and actual critical mass of people together. Obviously, technology is changing that dynamic between where you are and who you're interacting with, because now we can obviously, as we're doing right now, interacting with people who aren't actually in the room. And we're also interested in how that can affect economic development as well, and how that's changing the nature of these relationships. Local culture and institutions obviously play a major role, how we organize ourselves locally, and how larger systems of organization also affect us. My own dissertation research, a lot of it had to do with understanding the role of social networks. Part of that was I devised a computer simulation that actually simulates the creative process across time and space. A model that you can play with and build in different scenarios, that sort of thing. Based on what we know from sort of social psychology and sociology about who tends to interact with who, how learning happens between people, and basically how networks evolve over time and space. These are just diagrams of results of the model, showing how people interact with one another, how places develop as well, the interaction between knowledge, migration, movement of people, learning, and local identity, and eventually how that then leads into sort of the local economy as well. So a lot of that also leads into understanding what kinds of economic activities happen where they do, and why certain local contexts are